just a few months, Colorado lawmakers approved a package of land use bills that have been the subject of intense debate and lengthy public hearings in Boulder for years. The measures seek to increase housing density as part of a broader effort to drive down housing costs. Together, they represent one of the most significant steps state lawmakers have taken to overhaul housing restrictions in suburban communities and cities across the Front Range. And that is from an article titled How 5 New Colorado Land Use Measures Will Impact the City of Boulder by John Herrick, apologies, John, May 9th, 2024, in the Boulder Reporting Lab. And with that, welcome to House Einstein Podcast 44. I am Osman Parvez, your host, and with me is Hamish Crab. And if you want to read about our bios, you can find them at houseeinstein.com.
That's right. And wicked intro. We'll definitely dive into that later on in the pod. But for now, what's on tap today?
Well, first, apologies for no pod last week. I was riding a motorcycle in Moab midweek and made the executive decision to not record a podcast and be present for riding on the White Rim Trail. And Hamish also had a bit of a stomach bug, so that took us out of the running for the week.
No kidding. Yeah, it was rough.
Well,
anyway.
I'm glad you're feeling better, and we're back. We're getting caught up on some of the work that got deprioritized last week. Even though I may be on a trip, I travel with Starlink and have solar panels and a battery system for the van, and of course my laptop and equipment. So it is like a remote bunker if I head out to Moab or Fruta or something like that for the weekend. But typically this time of year I'm here, and so last week just had a little bit of a hiccup, but we're back. So let's talk about our mission and what we're here to do. Our mission at House Einstein.
Something about not how hard you fall, but how quick you get back up. You know, if we're putting a positive spin on it.
Yeah, and also helps you value health and wellness when you're back.
Yeah, health is wealth.
Health is wealth. Our mission at House Einstein is to help you make a smarter real estate decision, and that's also the mission of the podcast. However, if you are a client, you should just be picking up the phone and contacting your House Einstein agent. If you're not a client and you're just enjoying this podcast, thank you for listening, but this is entertainment. Our attorneys would like you to know that you should not rely on this podcast for financial advice, legal advice, spiritual or relationship advice. It's all humor. That's all we're here for, is just to make you laugh, and don't sue us.
Yep.
So
I'll be putting comedian in my Instagram bio soon enough.
That's right. Comedian. Stand up. That's
not
what this
clown.
Podcast is.
Comedian.
Not clown.
Yeah.
Comedian. Professional comedian. Call to action for this podcast. As a reminder, if you'd like to learn more about House Einstein, you can visit us at houseeinstein.com. We serve clients from the southern neighborhoods of Denver all the way up to Fort Collins, and then into the mountain towns. We primarily help sellers and buyers, and our entire approach is to educate and help you make a smarter real estate decision. We really upped our game on all fronts, and we could show you how we serve our clients in much better ways than your typical real estate agent. Okay, that cover that. Let's hit topics du jour.
Nailed it.
All right. Market conditions. We're going to do that kind of quick today. We're going to cover it in about 3 minutes. Then we're going to talk about some upcoming listings that are happening with House Einstein that you should probably know about. We're going to review 4 different sales that occurred recently in the city of Boulder. And again, we focus on Boulder, but we actually have a deep presence in Denver, in Louisville, in Lafayette, even in Erie. We serve quite a large footprint. Our distinction is not even on price range. It's whether you feel aligned with a mission to choose an agency and brokers who are here to help you be smart about real estate, not succumb to the smoke and mirrors. And then in the news, this is our chief segment in the podcast. We're going to talk about the Fed and the print that was released today. And I also, of course, the reason I read that intro and this is the meat of our presentation. This is Boulder. This is the tofu of our presentation. the big thick vegan entree, and that is all of the new laws that Governor Polis just signed, and what the impact may or may not be in the city of Boulder.
He has been
and then
busy.
The state legislators have been busy. So, and then we're going to tell you something you didn't know, and then we'll wrap it all up with a pretty bow.
Hey, it's going to be a good day. These are some sweet topics, and I'm woefully uneducated on the latest news from Polis, so it should be a learning moment for me.
Well, it'll be very interesting to talk about what actually was passed, but also how is this likely to play out in places that have historically been very anti-development, like the city of Boulder. And that sounds sort of negative when I say anti-development. It also sounds negative when I say pro-density. So all the spin, we're going to try to ignore the spin and just get to the heart of what these issues are. And also make clear my position on this so that there's no confusion, even though I'm not running for office, nor am I interested in running for office.
I'm glad you said something.
Okay, 3-minute market conditions overview. So it is the middle of May, which means the data from the previous month in April is now fully baked, and you can rely on it to be reasonably accurate. And we could talk about Louisville or Lafayette or Denver, but we're going to talk about the city of Boulder, and we're only going to talk about detached single-family houses. So what that means is this does not apply to condos. It does not apply to Longmont. It does not apply to other cities. It doesn't apply to unincorporated Boulder County. Even if you're directly adjacent to Boulder and not in the city, it may not apply to your specific situation. It also isn't divvied up by price range. And one of the things people really need to understand if you're coming into the city of Boulder is that the closer you are to open space within the city, the more valuable the real estate. Open space on the west side of town in particular is like waterfront property. And there can be a significant jump even for just being one street further west.
Do you have off the top of your head this statistic? What is it, like the border of Broadway contributes to like a difference in value by a decent percentage?
Yeah, I have a rule of thumb for that. I expect the difference between, let's say, Martin Acres and directly across Broadway on the west side, which is people often refer to as Table Mesa, although that's greater Table Mesa. It really is Kohler Mesa directly across, but that can be a 10% bump. Yeah. And it would not surprise me if it's a 10% bump. That passes the sniff test. And you see the same thing throughout town. So if you go to the north part of town, you see about a 10% jump just for crossing over Broadway. Broadway, 28th Street, Folsom, 19th Street, these are the major north-south arteries. And in fact, if you look at it might be on my personal YouTube. It could also be on the House Einstein YouTube. But years ago, I did a little analytical dive into how these north-south streets impact valuation. That's not the topic of this podcast, but it is very clear. So great question, Hamish.
Yeah.
But let me walk you through the city of Boulder detached single-family houses. So last month, this is the month of April, there were 174 new listings that hit the market. That's almost an 18% increase year over year. And the total number of homes for sale has now reached 286. That is a 35% increase year over year, and a significant jump from 220 homes that were available last month. Typically, inventory in most years, in normal years, peaks in May and June, and absorption also peaks in May or June. But this may not be a normal year, given that inventory is building and sales are slowing. So property that's
absorption is sales?
Yeah, well, absorption is sales as a percentage of inventory.
Gotcha.
So when I do this analysis in my spreadsheet, in my model, I take the most recent month's sales, so this would be the sales volume in April, and then express that as a percentage of the preceding month's inventory.
Okay.
So April sales over March inventory is how I've always calculated absorption.
Okay.
Because there's a 30 to 45 day lag from when a property goes under contract to when it closes.
Right,
so,
with loans and all that.
Well, even sometimes with
Could be
cash, but
anything.
typically cash deals are 3 weeks. Let's talk about pending sales. So pending sales in the city of Boulder, there are 80 properties in under contract status. That's pending or active/backup for you MLS geeks. And that's a decrease of 10% year over year. That's a pretty significant drop. And by the way, it's a drop from 84 in the month of March. Now, it's kind of uncommon to see March to April see a decrease. In typical years, March to April has an increase, and it's usually a pretty steep one. So this year we're seeing a drop in pending sales. And as far as closed sales go, these are the deals that actually got to the title company and finished. 83 deals closed, and that's of course reflective of the preceding month's property that went under contract. So that's an increase of almost 24%. So now you're getting mixed information. Sales were up, but pending sales are down. Keep that in mind. What gives? What's happening? Days on market 38, which is a decrease of 17.4%. And that is days on market for sold property. And then let's talk about sale price, which is always an interesting statistic when you have a very small data set like the city of Boulder. The median sale price for the month of April. Detached single family houses, again, 1.57 million, which is an increase of 18.5%. But like I tell listeners frequently, that sale price is not necessarily indicative of an increase in value. It's more indicative of an increase or decrease in what type of home is selling in the cohort, in the data set. So if a bunch of high-end homes suddenly sell, you're going to see a much larger increase in the median sale price than if a bunch of entry-level homes sell, in which case you should see a decrease. So we like to look at price per total square foot as another sniff test. And last month, the median price per total square foot in the city of Boulder was $537, and that's a decrease of 7.1%. So increase median sale price, decrease median dollar per square foot. Mixed data signals, and that's because small data sets like the city of Boulder can be quite volatile, and you need to look at time periods over a few months to really get a sense of what's happening. And of course, if you're really active in the market, you're buying or selling, you have to look at the data relative to your specific situation. And we just toured a bunch of houses, for example, with clients to make sure that we're priced appropriately a few days ahead of when we intend to set a list price for an upcoming listing. And I don't know any other agent that really goes that granular, but I don't know how they can ethically not do it either, because it's so important to understand the competitors when you price your home.
Yeah, nailed it. I think I've only seen in the business maybe 4 other agents actually go and tour our listings as a benchmark, if that. So.
And we track it because we're doing a competitive analysis of our listings every week, and we know which houses have had showings. And then if that agent suddenly has a listing, well, yeah, that was a preview, and now they have a competitor listing listed. It's what they should be doing, but very few do.
Yep.
So one of the things you may want to ask for when you're thinking about hiring a listing agent is a list of services and how that is distinct from their competition. And I actually just updated this for our company, and I was surprised I managed to squeeze it onto one page for how many things we do that are different and better than our competition. And that's one of those things, competitive benchmarking. Every week you should be going through the competitors once the listing is active, and you should be considering whether your listing is still attractive and competitive next to its competition, next to other homes a buyer might acquire. And if it's not, you may want to make an adjustment, or you know you're going to be waiting a while, because people don't spend millions of dollars willy-nilly. They go see what their options are.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty solid 3-minute overview there.
I think it went for longer than 3, but that's because you were asking questions. If you just let me fire it off like a shotgun at the audience, we could get it done in 3. But I appreciate the questions, actually.
Yeah,
you should ask more questions.
Well, now I guess my next question for you is, what's next? Oh, wait, I'm taking a drink.
A drink of fizzy water, for the record.
Yeah,
a drink of fizzy water.
Yeah, good.
All right, let's talk about what's coming up for House Einstein. So those of you that know us and love us and want to know what we're up to, we have a couple of new listings that are coming up in our office neighborhood, Uptown Broadway. And Uptown Broadway is a really unique and interesting development. I bought there because finishes are much higher quality than your typical Boulder apartment complex or condo complex. Not quite as high quality as, say, the Peloton, or actually the quality's on par with the Peloton, but not quite as high quality as, say, the Arete. And priced way more reasonably than either of those options. So it doesn't have, historically, it has not had the downtown location. And I saw the North Boulder sub-community plan and realized that they're going to invest a lot of money, including this new $16 million library, the Boulder Arts District, the new BMoCA building. All of that is part of a plan to improve North Boulder, far North Boulder, and that is 100% right in the target area for Uptown Broadway. And these two particular properties, both are very attractive. One is a live-work unit with 2 bedrooms on the upper and an office on the main, all of which is entered through your private doorway. And the other one is a luxury 2-bedroom unit that doesn't have the office but is still really nice and turnkey. So if you don't need the office, that one is available. Both of them are slightly delayed in listing. One is having some updates, and the other one has a tenant that needs to move out, and then we're going to stage it. But both of those properties should be on the market in early June. And I think are well worth seeing, particularly if you don't want to live next to a bunch of students and you want to live in close proximity to some restaurants and shops. And for the office unit, and this is something maybe we should have said, tell me something you don't know, the offices, the live-work units, pay residential tax rates. So there's a huge advantage to buying one of those live-work units. You can rent them separately, by the way. You can rent upstairs separate from downstairs, and you pay residential tax rates on those properties. And anybody that's familiar with how much it costs to have an office in Boulder, I hope your ears perked up. That's a fantastic deal and something to think about. The risk factor, of course, is what's going to happen with the library. A lot of the neighborhood wasn't crazy about it. And what's actually been built is gorgeous. It's a really attractive building. And knock on wood, the city can manage it better than it has managed the historic older library downtown. And one of those issues has been the use of bathrooms by homeless people that have smoked meth and camped out nearby. The homeless encampments are something that affect all major cities. Boulder is not immune, is not alone in its fight to humanely address homelessness in our community while also not degrading the quality of life for everyone else. And we'll see how this plays out. I'm cautiously optimistic that the powers that be have thought through this and are going to do a much better job in managing the issue, and that the library will actually be a fantastic amenity for the neighborhood.
Yeah, well said. And a lot of, I don't know, I don't talk to a whole lot of people about the library, but what I'm hearing more and more frequently is that libraries have done have gone through a great effort to kind of modernize, and they offer a lot more services than just books at this point. So I'm kind of excited to see kind of the amenities that they do offer the general public. Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. Maybe there's some community space that we could potentially even use with our real estate meetups or other types of things. Yeah. I haven't done a real estate meetup, by the way, in many years, but there's no reason we couldn't start doing them again.
Hey, it'd be fun.
All right, let's talk about a couple of other listings. And I can't mention these addresses because the only time I can publicly market these properties is within 7 days of them about to hit the market when they're in coming soon status. That's the law of the land for real estate agents. And irrespective of what they tell you with private client networks, that's the rule. So this next property is in...
Sorry.
I
was saying those private client networks.
I know. Yeah. Well, look, it's true, right? If you were to call me and say, hey, Osman, tell me about this listing. I heard you might be getting a listing in Uptown Broadway. Well, guess what? I can actually tell you a little bit about it, but I can't directly market the property until it's actually on the MLS as coming soon. I can't put a sign in the yard. But if you happen to be one of my clients and we happen to have a match, guess what? You might get it. And this is a little bit of a gray area with when does actually marketing property begin. So So there is the potential, and then there's the reality. And we're going to talk about the reality in the Tell You Something You Don't Know segment coming up.
That's right. Anyway, sorry to derail.
That's okay. Let's talk about the Wildwood neighborhood property. So Wildwood is a neighborhood directly across from Wonderland Lake in North Boulder. And it is a neighborhood of mostly two-story houses with one-car garages, and the homes were built, I think, in the 80s. Most of these properties are not updated. Some of them are lucky enough to back to the open space. And yeah, like most properties throughout Boulder, the vast majority need tons of updates. And we happen to have a listing coming up sometime in the next month that is amazing inside. Like turnkey, won't embarrass you to invite the boss over for dinner and clients over for dinner and entertainment, because it is truly a remarkably attractive and updated interior. It's a place you'd love living. Plus, you can just go under the bridge and be in Wonderland open space without a car, without even a bicycle, in like
no
60
time.
seconds.
Yeah,
122 minutes, and you're on the dirt, on the trails in world-class open space. So great property coming up. And then our last one, and this is our newest listing. I think this one's going to go first. We should have it on the market, at least in coming soon status, early next week, the weekend before Memorial Day. It should be at least, you should be able to at least see a few photos. That's our goal.
Yep.
And it is a really nice, charming ranch in Majestic Heights with a basement that has been lovingly updated, and it has a vaulted ceiling. Happens to be very, very close to a very popular park.
Nice.
And it is a real, I mean, it's not a cheap flip.
Home. Yeah.
Let's put it that way. So there are, even though the updates are a little older, they were so well executed that you walk in and you are immediately confronted by a living space and kitchen that are just charming, that make you feel good, with all the natural light coming in through the vaulted ceilings and skylights. And there's some competitors on the market, and those competitors are in compromised locations, too close to Table Mesa, or are cheap flips where the interior finish quality is really poor, and it's visible and obvious to anyone who knows what to look for. And this home is none of those things, and I'm confident it's going to go pretty quick because of its spectacular location.
The location, yeah, it's really killer. I've got some personal trivia to fill you in on about the location off podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, you're teasing something.
Some Hamish lore. Yeah.
Hamish lore. Oh.
No,
All
so
right.
keep your eye out for that. And if you want to see it the moment it becomes coming soon, check us out on Instagram. I'll be sure to either post a quick little snippet video or a picture of it once it hits coming soon status.
Yeah. But if
House
you're a
sign
client, hint, hint, call me.
Yeah. And not maybe.
And not maybe.
Yeah.
Just call me. We're here for you. These podcasts and newsletters, which we do monthly, they are second to our clients. Clients are always our top priority. All right, let's walk through our next segment, and
Yes.
that is sales of the week. I used to call it just sale of the week, but honestly, there's just too many, and they're interesting to talk about, and they're always educational, so we're going to cover 4 of them. We're going to do it kind of fast. Right?
Sorry,
we
we started going at 1, and we're at 4.
And then we got 2, and now we're up to 4.
Yep.
And pretty soon this is going to be like the newsletter where I'm doing 10 every week. But 4 is plenty. And obviously, we're not going to push this podcast past 90 minutes. And I think we're actually going to hit 60 for this particular podcast. But I think this is something you will not hear from other agents, not this level of analysis and directness over the deal. And this sort of insight you can't get anywhere else. So I think it adds a lot of value, hence we invest time into it.
Completely agree.
All right, our first deal, 4082 Dawn Court. This property was built in the late 80s. It's a 2-story house with a very de minimis HOA fee. And it is in sort of northeast Boulder. The neighborhood subdivision is technically Sundance 2, but the way that people think about this is it's just south of J Road, just west of 28th. You're not far from the Elks Park, And the Elks Park is sort of a mostly undeveloped park. The cruisers stop there at least once a year because it's sort of off the beaten path. And it is well connected to the bike path system. So you can easily get to the rest of Boulder via bike path. You do not have to ride 28th Street. And this particular property had been on the market, it looks like about a month, when Ian locked down on it. Ian's an agent with House Einstein. You can learn about Ian at houseeinstein.com. Click the team link, or the Why Us, I think, is the link. And Ian was successful in negotiating a discount of about $25,000 off of list, and the deal was very smooth. It's a 1,300 square foot house with, kind of garage forward design.
Yeah.
Very, very common, but the main living area is vaulted. There's a set of steps up the side.
It's tucked off on an alley, the home.
It's tucked off on an alley.
So you've got kind of like this loop on the entry, like at the end of the street, and then there's an alley off to the side, and you kind of, it's a little bit more removed from even a street proper, which is kind of neat. Yeah.
I mean, the bathrooms had some inexpensive backsplashes installed at some point, and otherwise it doesn't look like it has much of anything in the way of updates, but still a very good deal. So it's it's bigger than a Martin Acres ranch. It has a 2-car garage, and it sold for $770, which is a very reasonable price. Don't have a lot of lot, unlike those ranches in South Boulder. Like, you could basically, for about $800, you can buy a basic ranch in South Boulder with more lot but not as much square footage in the house, and a much older home. 80s era homes are going to have way better insulation, much bigger closets, better flow between the living area and the kitchen. So there's a lot of advantages to this type of house, and Ian said that the closing was truly a pleasure. And I guess we should mention the counterparty, John Hatch, who we've done deals with in the past, and he's also been a strong supporter of Growing Gardens, the nonprofit I served for 3 terms, and also at one point was actually a gardener. John's a lovely person to work with, and the moment I heard he was doing a deal with Ian, I knew everything would go smoothly because he's rock solid. And Ian said that it was the only closing he's ever been to where everyone seemed to be having a really good time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's deal 1.
Nice.
Deal number 2, 15 South 33rd Street in Martin Acres. And this is a really unusual house because I happen to know the street, actually the cross streets of this location really well. I lived on Martin Drive for many years. I also lived on 33rd Street. I know a lot of the neighbors. And this home had been not particularly well loved. My recollection is it was actually pretty derelict. And at one point it was offered for $750. This was back in 2021. And nothing happened. It was pulled off the market, and an enterprising developer or flipper snuck in there in 2022 and acquired it. And they acquired it for, what's interesting? Actually, I think they acquired it in 2021. If you look at the history on the MLS, it's very interesting. United Colorado LLC paid $662.3, and then somebody named Nathan Emery bought it for $668, and then Nathan sold it back to United Colorado LLC for $735. So how much you want to bet Nathan's part of the LLC? And this is one of those things that your attorney tells you not to do. Okay, if you want to protect the integrity of an LLC, you never commingle it with your personal financials, and you have somebody buying and selling it back to the LLC. But in any event, it was a flip, but it was not done poorly. It seemed to have done to a very high standard. The square footage is substantial. It's 1,763, all on the main. It does not have a garage. That was the one big negative. It has a carport, but vaulted ceilings, really nicely executed inside and out. Landscaping, colors. Look at the photos. This is just really, really well done.
Yeah.
And the vaulted ceilings create a bigger sense of space in all the rooms. The closet sizes are large. The home was well staged. Dot the I's, cross the T's. The listing agent did a decent job.
I've been watching
and
this one. This is the one on the corner, yeah.
We would have taken it to one of our buyers who is looking for something like this, but has to have at least 1-car garage, preferably 2. If this had a 2-car garage, they would have been all over it. But unfortunately, no garage, carport, which is a deal killer. But otherwise, this home is just lovely, and it was listed at 12575, which is a very unique and interesting number. This is somebody who does not want to round up or down, says we're going to go for this unusual number, 12575. And it was available for 6 days.
Wow.
Somebody threw money on it and jumped on it and then bailed out.
Oh, really? It went
Almost
on, it got
immediately.
withdrawn on?
And then it went, I think this is a typo. I'd have to ask the listing agent what exactly is going on with the status, because it's under contract, out of contract, under contract, all the same day.
Whoa.
April 17th, 3 different changes. Well, 2 different changes. It goes from active to under contract to active. Oh, so I guess that's 3. And then back from active to under contract all in one day. And then it sold for just $7,500 below list with, let's see, any disclosed concessions, no disclosed concessions. Out of town agent that probably didn't benefit the buyer very much. We happened to meet them because we went and looked at this house, even though it had already sold. We stood in front of the driveway, and the new owners are like, "Hi," and we said, "Hey, we're just, we're getting ready to list a home like this, and very curious about how how the inside of this house looked." And the inside of the house is amazing. It's really well done.
They let you in.
So they let us in.
Nice.
They give us the whole tour. They're really sweet people. Welcome to Martin Acres, people.
Yeah. It's got that family-friendly neighborhood feel to it. Martin Acres does.
Martin Acres is really, all neighborhoods in Boulder are lovely, but Martin Acres will always have a special space in my heart for having both some eccentric, weird people and also lots of young families and also college students. And so it's sort of a bastion of eclectiveness in the city, and it's got a great park, and the community is pretty well knit. Mm-hmm. So Martin Acres is a great spot and a great house. So that's the deal here. You won't see a 1,763 square foot ranch without a basement very often in Martin Acres. And you would think the lot size would support a bigger garage, but the way the lot is shaped, I don't think it's going to be possible.
It's an odd one.
Maybe.
Yeah, the backyard's like kind of a sliver. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I think I covered that one.
Nailed it.
Oh, our typical advice on flips is don't buy one. Like there's one right now in Arapahoe Ridge that we were really close to writing an offer on. I'm not going to mention the address or the listing agent, but there were 2 very, very similar homes that popped up at the same time. And the non-flip, even though it was more dated, was quality. Everything inside was done to a high standard.
I saw the flip, didn't I?
The flip priced $250,000 or so higher. It looks like everything was done quickly and cheaply, and it doesn't look as good. It looks like they cut corners and rushed to get it on the market, and they want hundreds of thousands of dollars more, which is really just souring my buyer because it just isn't worth. It should be worth less, not more, than the one that's not a flip. But that's not how the market works. So we'll see.
Yeah, no kidding.
One
more
still
thing.
on the market though. Oh, go ahead.
These dark window frames, I guess they're called. I really like the kind of contrast that they provide, but they remind me of this house that we went to see about 2 years ago that the window was wrapped in electrical tape to make it black. And I'm sure these aren't this, but it just reminded me of that. I'm sure
I've never seen anything where, and that was, I won't mention the listing agent. It's not her fault.
No.
Whoever the seller was decided that the way to make the windows look black is just put electrical tape on them. And it was so bad, and that home sat on the market for so long.
No kidding.
Don't do that. And by the way, I'm not sure black windows, they look great, but I don't know if it's such a smart idea.
I don't know.
Because they're going to get a beating. So thermal expansions is real, right? Mm-hmm. And if the frames and the glass are both not fiberglass, so if they're fiberglass, they expand and contract at much closer rates. But if it's vinyl windows that are black, the vinyl is going to expand and contract at a very different rate than the glass. So I doubt these windows, if they're vinyl, are going to last very long. Be careful buying. They're all the rage, right? If I was flipping a house, that's what I would do too. But if you're buying for the long term, black windows are not necessarily the smartest idea.
Good point. Yeah, I didn't think of that.
Well, or a black house even.
That's getting popular, and I just, I don't know if it makes sense to me. Anyhow.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Number 3 for the podcast, 8495 Arapahoe Road. And this is a really interesting and remarkable property. And Hamish, we first looked at this. Actually, I dragged Leah to go look at this when it hit the market in 2020. So it was May of 2020. And I'm like, this thing's only 1.1. It's underpriced. It's surrounded by conservation land, protected open space. It's a huge amount of acreage. It's 6.5 acres. And the home looked kind of dingy inside, but our thinking was, well, actually, we could have bought this house instead of the one we did. Our thinking was, well, we'll improve it over time, and we'll make some money if we ever have to sell it, but we'll never see this listing pop up again. And then we went and looked at it. And what we saw scared us. Because the house, the lot appeared to be much lower in grade than some of the land surrounding it, including a big pond.
Oh.
And it smelled musty. It looked musty. It just triggered us really quickly that this property doesn't just need a cosmetic remodel. This property needs like a lot of work to fix the grading issue that's around it. And it's not falling in, but we had strong suspicions that there were structural issues, especially in that upper cupola kind of structure.
Yeah.
So we passed, and we were glad we did because we weren't going to spend 1.3 cash, which is eventually, I think, what it sold for. So it went for, and again, this is June of 2020 is when it closed, and it closed for 1.3. Let me pull up the old listing too, and I'm going to put the old listing in the cart, and we'll send all of these so you can see how it compares. But the old listing did sell for cash, and yeah, they didn't change anything on the outside. They painted it when I look at the old photos, but the inside, there was one particular area around.
Repoured, or is that the same still? Like the sidewalk and stuff?
I don't know, but hold on one second.
Right.
If you enter the main level, there was like a sunken, moldy, wet garden in the middle of the house.
Cool.
Okay? And yeah, it really just scared us in terms of how much money we thought we'd have to put in to fix it, and whether or not and our intention was not to flip it, but that was like the back of the envelope. If we had to, what could we do? Well, so the people that bought it were flippers. And these people, let me get the name right. Well, I don't know if I should be naming them.
Unless it's an LLC.
Not public record.
Yeah.
I mean, it's public record. So Deborah Spence acquired it in 2020. And in 2023, sold it. So she paid 1.3. They paid 1.3. And then they sold it to Ryan and Kaylee McGowan 3 years later. So it took 3 years to rehab this house. So summer of last year, this house sold for $2.4 million. And when you look at the photos of that listing, hang on, I got to find the right cart. It's been remarkably transformed. The home is, first, the marketing's much better, but the exterior's been painted. It looks like there's a bunch of new flat work, Hamish. All the hardwood floors are redone. That sunken garden's missing. So they filled that in and concreted it or whatever they did to get rid of the moisture. Who knows? They should have fixed the grading too. Has cool, hip, modern metal stair railings. I don't know if the windows have been done. They certainly have been painted. The kitchen's all new. And it's had a lot of work. So that home sold for $2.4 million last summer. And lo and behold, the sellers, the buyers in last summer decided that actually this may not be the home for them. So 6 months later, they put it on the market. So they paid $2.4 for it in June. By December, they wanted out, and they listed it at $2.65 in early December, which, by the way, is a horrible time to list. Like I don't know what agent told them that's a good idea. And frequently, agents tell people what is really in their best interest, not in their clients. So I could see this being, oh yeah, you should list it right now, right before the holidays. But I'm going to sign you up for a year-long listing agreement because I know it's not going to sell right now, especially at 2.65, $250,000 more than you paid for it.
Yeah.
In December. All right, whatever. They do a duplicate listing right before Christmas. Maybe the people aren't noticing it. Well, let's just refresh it. Yep, nothing happened. Still 2.65. By February, they dropped the price to 2.55, so they knock 100 grand off. And by the end of March, they've knocked it down to 2.5. And no one's biting, and desperation is increasing. And guess what? On May 10th, they took an offer, and the property sold for 2.3. So the current buyer acquired this property for $100,000 below what the last buyer paid for it. So these people lost 100 grand to get out of the house.
No kidding.
And you kind of wonder what the heck was wrong with it. And I suspect it has a lot to do with the grading and the mosquitoes from the local ponds and swampiness of the land. Who knows? But it is a spectacular location. I just couldn't, when I saw it on the ground, Hamish, I couldn't get my head around how low it was relative to the lands around it.
Well, I'm also looking at it, the drone photos, and it looks almost like there was initially just one of your standard, I don't know what the barn designs are, but your standard kind of barn, and then they just built around it, and there happened to be grain silo neighboring it, and they just also incorporated that. And like it's a very interesting design of a house. And then just another note, I do very much, I love the coloring that they did for the drone photos. I think they're really pretty photos. The sky, the desaturation around the house, it's artistically interesting. I don't know if it's selling the house. I mean, considering the price and the days on market, maybe not, but personally I like it. Yeah.
Well, the marketing was fine. I don't think there was a problem with the photos. I think the photos look great. And the problem is that, well, they overpriced it when they tried to relist it in December. And frankly, I don't know if the functional issues with this lot are fixed. And you could see this. Go look at a Google map. Forget about the aerial photos. Mm-hmm. You could see the giant pond on the southeast of this property.
Yeah.
And you could also see the sunken land that in the satellite photo is bare dirt. That's another pond. And so this property has got tons and tons of water, and then a giant pond off to the northeast. There's also something labeled Burke Lake. So this is all very low-lying land, and that makes this property pretty susceptible to damage from water. And when I saw that and understood the topography, it just scared us. So likely how this property came to be, Hamish, is that, yes, it was all contiguous farmland. And then they sold off the north lot to Teller Lake. They sold off the west lots, and the east, they sold that too. And basically you end up with this sliver of land, which is surrounded by open space on three sides. And they may have sold it to the county as part of conservation easements. I'm not entirely sure what the actual history was, but I do remember calling my contact at the county to talk about the conservation easements, because to make sure I understood that truly it was not going to be developable. And the answer was that it wasn't. At least that's my recollection, and I think that was this property.
Right.
But that's what you should do. If you're thinking about paying a premium for land with a house on it that's pretty attractive, that happens to be surrounded on 4 sides by open space or 3 sides by open space, you should always, as part of your due diligence, verify that truly is undevelopable open space. Get a legal opinion, because as we're going to talk about shortly, there's a real push for development.
Mm-hmm.
And this is land that, even if it's county owned, doesn't mean it can't be developed, or city owned. In fact, the city might be the one developing it.
So with that, what's our final home?
Okay, our final one. And again, I really like that property, so don't take this the wrong way. I just couldn't get my head around how you fix the low-lying, waterlogged land.
The swampy.
All around it.
Yeah.
The swamp. How is this swamp? And then what's it going to be like living in this swamp? Even if there is no drainage issue and you fix all that, what's it going to be like living in this swamp? Mm-hmm. So that was the deal killer for me. So, all right, last one.
Yes.
And this is a great example of the premium that people will pay, and how quickly property like this will disappear for what's turnkey, recently constructed, and well-designed. So this is a house that's located northwest of North Boulder Park in Newlands. It's a 4,000 square foot home built in 2023 on a 6,400 square foot lot unlike our beautiful listing in Newlands right now, it's one of those east-west facing houses. And this one faces east. So you're going to have a pretty icy driveway, right? It's really bad if the house faces north, but you're going to feel a little bit more penned in, and you're going to cast bigger shadows on your neighbors. So it's harder to develop east-west facing houses, but this one's been built. And it's 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, has that all critical 2-car garage and decent sized lot. If you flip through the photos, you see what looks like well-chosen design elements throughout.
Yeah.
Nano wall into the backyard.
Yeah, no, this is
a really nice
pretty one.
Functional kitchen, a little covered eating area, a big 2-car garage. Like, this is move-in ready.
Yeah.
And move-in ready sells for a premium.
And
so they were
go ahead.
able to lock down $855 a square or 3.45, so just a token $50,000 below list. And it did sell for with a conventional fixed rate mortgage, not cash deal. So keep that in mind. That's something interesting. Yeah. Usually 3+ you see them as cash deals. Well, here's one that was not.
Wonder if there's a sizable down payment. What do you think of the I almost want to call it like the hearth or something, but it's that wood paneled section separating the living room and the kitchen. It's like a chunk. I don't know what else to call it.
You talking about where the cabinets?
Yeah.
I think the fridge might be built into. I got to look at the photo a little bit better.
Yeah, it's the second photo in the stack, at least on Realtor.com. It's just unusual. That's all. It's a little too cubic actually. To me, but yeah.
That looks and that high fireplace is kind of weird, but because it leaves a lot of mechanical and open space underneath it. But this sort of built-in seamless wood cabinetry, I see a lot in higher end homes. It's a look. It's a thing.
It is that.
It often has built-in, like, there's some ducting hidden behind it.
I can see some on the top too.
Yeah, sometimes the cabinets are much more shallow than you would expect. And the joinery, like the way they're finished, is intended to be very tight. So I don't even know what designers call this, but it's not uncommon. And the kitchen isn't a galley kitchen. It's still a big open kitchen, but that space is separated by this big structural element.
Yeah, and then the folding doors to the backyard. I mean, the house it's gorgeous. And the lighting, the window choices, the styling for the windows, it's a good looking place.
Black windows.
It was such a statement of wood paneling to me. I don't know why. It just really spoke to me. Had to bring it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing to notice, by the way, if you're a stager or somebody thinking about listing their home, is how they use color pops. So the home is very neutral and white out, but then there are little color pops of greens or blues. And they've color matched that to various elements of the house. They didn't go to extreme with it, but they did a nice job. It's subtle. But most obviously, it's in the upper level, probably the primary bedroom. You can see the blue theme running throughout.
Yeah,
that's what you're really going for, is subtle color matching and complements. Like the painting in the basement has a color tone that's very similar to the couch cushions. All of it being neutral. There's no photos of people to distract you. Like this is a really well-designed house. It's well-staged and well-priced, and it went very fast.
Yeah.
Less than 2 weeks on market. You didn't have to drop everything to write an offer. They got $50,000. Actually, strike that. Holy cow, Hamish, we're missing something big on this one. It's not 2 weeks on market. This home was listed at overpriced $3.9 million. So they initially in August, they went for the jugular on pricing. They said, it's August, let's test it, 3.9. And the market said, no thanks. And so they sat on the market for 2 months and dropped it to 3.7. And then they pulled it off in February. And I don't know, did they fire the first agent for overpricing it so badly? Let's see.
Savage.
It's savage, but that's absurd. So I thought this was priced right. I don't know how I must have seen this before, and for some reason my brain is, well, let's see. Is it the same?
And this is,
I'm not going to name them because we do deals with these people, and I live in this town.
I live here.
I live in this town. So, no, they went the distance. They went the distance. They cut the price so from 3.9 to 3.5, so 300,000 below their original list price. They wasted all the fourth quarter with wishful thinking, and then they wasted most of the first quarter. And then by March, they finally had the come to Jesus moment, or come to whatever your deity is, 3.5, and then they took 50,000 below list. So I mean, if they had first listing in the fall is a really challenging time to sell a home. There are far fewer buyers, and you really have to have it dialed in. And if you try to go for the test it price, you end up leaving a lot of money on the table. So they probably should have just priced it at 3.5 last year and saved themselves a lot of time. But they thought people were willing to pay 300,000 more.
They gave it a shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's our last one, but still a gorgeous house. So all that stuff about it flying off the market, not true for this particular case because, well, it's not a lie. If it's priced right, yes. if it's turnkey, beautifully designed, well photographed, marketing is right, priced right, it will sell fast. But if the pricing is absurd, then no, it won't. Not everyone wants to just waste $300,000 more than they have to get the house. And by the way, there's a lot more buyers in March than in August. So
yeah. Okie dokie. Well, I think we're at the news part.
Time to talk about the news?
Yeah.
Oh boy, we might end up at an hour and a half. I thought we were gonna rip through this, but we got derailed by this last listing. Okay. Yep. All right. Let's see if we can cover it pretty quick. The Fed news, I feel like people can get anywhere, Hamish. But it's important to note.
Oh, I'd love to hit it. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of the market's been waiting for the Fed to indicate inflation is slowing or becoming more under control, and therefore we can start to expect rates to start to drop. There's a lot of segments of the real estate market that are rate sensitive, that are monthly payment sensitive, both on the list side and the buy side. Because as I was just meeting with some clients yesterday who happen to be podcast listeners, they mentioned that, the killer rate they got several years ago is a huge factor in what they decide to do next. And so a lot of the neighborhood that they're in also were able to acquire at much lower prices and much lower rates. And now you have higher prices and higher rates, and things are slowing down. So here's the news. The CPI index, this is from the Fed, rose only 0.3% over the previous month and 3.4% over the previous year. So 3.4% year over year. And that's a tiny notch down from March's rate, which is 3.5% year over year, and 0.4% month over month. April's monthly increase came in ahead of economic forecasts of a 0.4% uptick. So that's, Wall Street loves that it looks like inflation is less than all these economists predicted, okay, by 0.1%. And the annual rise in prices matched estimates according to data from Bloomberg. So which one is it, right? One says it matched, one says it came in below. On a core basis, so it matched on a core basis, which strips out the cost of food and gas, only kind of important costs. All right. Prices in April climbed 0.3% over the previous month and 3.6% year over year. This is the core basis, cooler than March's data. And both measures met economists' expectations. And as of the time I wrote that little footnote, the S&P was up 1%. So
big numbers.
In short, big numbers for the whole broad market to move 1%. That's a big deal. But the way to think about it is, this was in line with what economists are predicting. And so therefore, market does like certainty, or better than certainty is upside surprises, and hence the 1% increase. But I don't think this accelerates any rate decreases. I think it's going to happen when it happens, and probably right before the elections is my guess.
Yeah. I mean, kind of predictable, but also we shall see.
Are we allowed to talk about politics?
I don't think so.
We keep dancing around it.
It's in the real estate handbook. Do not discuss politics.
Right.
Maybe we'll do it as a podcast special a couple of months from now or something.
Let me say it this way. I have people that are hard left, and I have people that are hard right, and I don't judge either of them for their extremes. And I just wish our government spent our money better. That's what I wish upon our country.
And
The future is clear. We're probably going to have means-tested Social Security. We're probably going to have better quality healthcare universally. Let's all hope for that. But we have to get better at how we spend our money. And man, we waste a lot of it. And that's a whole nother topic. And I don't want to go any further than that.
No, but that's, enough people, I think, forget about that. That are, people complain about paying taxes, but not enough people complain about where our taxes are being spent. Anyhows.
And I'm a registered independent, and I'm not running for office. And I will not be stealing any votes from either candidate.
Good man.
With this tiny podcast. Okay.
Huge podcast.
Let's move on.
All right.
To the big news. The big news. Not a surprise. I've been talking about this for years. That the state and local elected leadership is pushing very hard to increase housing supply in the state of Colorado. And that is happening despite objections from a lot of homeowners in places like the city of Boulder, where a lot of long-term residents feel that Boulder has reached occupancy and should not be looking to massively increase the population. It's sort of like, there's a joke, like the moment you buy a house, you start complaining about the traffic, right? Mm-hmm. And before you buy the house, all you want is more supply. And so this NIMBY-YIMBY sort of thing going on has been going on a long time. And the only thing I feel strongly is that it's something that should be occurring with the consent of the neighborhoods where these changes are going to happen. And unfortunately, that voice is a voice in the wilderness because no one is pushing for that. This is a spoonful of medicine with some sugar to make it go down, except there really isn't much sugar. So let's walk through it. The city of Boulder will likely have to change many of its housing density policies, including those near bus stops, occupancy limits on unrelated people living together in an apartment, parking minimums for housing developments, and rules for renting out ADUs. So, and that's again from the Boulder Reporting Lab. The occupancy limit has been widely ignored for many, many, many years. It will continue to be widely ignored, even if the rules take another year or two be affected, because they have not been enforced since COVID anyway. So this is a nothing burger when it comes to occupancy limits, other than there will be some landlords that will be more comfortable advertising their 4 and 5 bedroom units and more comfortable signing 4 and 5 people to the lease because they are not going to worry about violating Boulder Code when there's a state law that prohibits the city from restricting the number of people that can live together on a family basis. Morally, I agree with that, by the way. I don't think that government has any business telling adults telling adults they can or cannot live together as long as it's safe.
Right. And
we're not over occupying like 12 people to a room. Like, I think that there's something morally wrong about telling private landowners
very weird one
homeowners that you, as one yourself, Hamish, that you can't have someone share your bedroom unless they're married to you. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Or it's your cousin.
Well, I mean,
like, what?
When I was shopping, I was looking at this like 5-bedroom house that was kind of a basket case, and I was like completely aware of the occupancy laws. And I mean, my plan at that point was just to skirt it, because it's just so absurd.
You would never skirt the law, Hamish.
I mean, yeah, not at all. I take it back. I didn't have a plan. That's why I didn't get it.
Right, like most people would ignore this, and the enforcement is nil anyway. So again, nothing burger on
good point.
Occupancy limits. And the next one, it does have significant impact. So ADUs. And basically, Boulder cannot pass rules that prohibit people from building ADUs or functionally restrict ADUs. And what that means is that so-called granny flats or au pair residents, you can legally build these. The city can't unnecessarily restrict them any longer. And they have for a long time, including one way that keeps landlords from building ADUs. And that is going away. So it doesn't matter whether it's owner-occupied or not, except for short-term rentals. The short-term rentals are still subject to owner-occupancy rules. But ADUs, whether you're a landlord that owns a property with that potential or you're a homeowner, you can now legally build them. and how that actually gets enacted, because there's a whole bunch of rules that have to go away. So this has to be reconciled with a lot of other code. And but I think the net effect is that property with larger lots, particularly those that are north-south oriented, that aren't casting solar shadows, like our listing in Newlands right now, that has a giant garage in the back, expect that type of property to suddenly have an ADU in it.
And I was actually...
Either as a separate structure or a basement ADU.
I was just going to say, isn't it an advantage if you're planning on adding an ADU, isn't it already an advantage to have a detached garage? For some sort of... I thought you brought something up like that.
I always thought so, but I think the reality of the fact is that all the other rules for building quality, insulation, the green energy rules would almost make it more cost effective to knock down the existing garage.
Just start from scratch.
It might allow you so you might be able to build it like we see in various places where they keep one wall of the garage up, so you don't lose the location on the lot.
Yeah.
And then they build 3 walls, and then they later build that last wall up. Like one wall is old and everything else is new. The ceiling height, the roof height is maintained, so you don't bump into height limits. Like all sorts of shenanigans to end run around these types of rules. So probably the answer is yes, it's more advantageous to have that detached garage.
Yeah, okay.
So, third item, parking minimums. That's going away in a lot of locations that are near transit stops. And that's often been used as a regulatory mechanism to prohibit or reduce development. So that's going away. And then the housing density near transit part, this one worries me. So this specifically applies to locations that are directly adjacent to bus stops or other transit stops, which would mean like the Table Mesa parking garage, for example. Maybe all the stops along the skip route, right, which is a huge route and cuts through a lot of Boulder. And what that means is, so they're talking about allowing at least 40 dwelling units per acre. That's a lot of units.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
if you can't go sideways, where do they go?
What's this, that development we talked about a while ago where it was, like the 200 square foot micro apartments?
Right.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Build micro apartments, or are you going to go up?
Yeah.
So I think that this may force the city to reduce restrictions on height limits.
Reconsider its like solar laws, right?
Well, yeah. Well, solar laws, but also just in general height limits. So I think that if the city has to allow 40 units an acre or more within major bus lines, they can't put in code that keeps people from doing it. So this is primarily going to affect low-density neighborhoods, but we'll see. I'm fearful that the height limits are going to go away because the city will have to comply with state-level ordinances on housing density. And it's not over yet. There's still more stuff coming. The city, there's one coming on accountability that if it gets signed is going to force Boulder to even build a needs assessment. I mean, there's a lot of rules that are going to change. The change in real estate doesn't become visible on the ground until years later. But I think a lot of people in some of these low-density neighborhoods are going to be surprised that they suddenly have an ADU, a 2-story ADU in the neighbor's backyard, and no one asked them. And that's not the neighborhood they bought into. And what happened to my view? And look at all of the cars on the street. I think those complaints city councils should be prepared to hear for years and years to come.
I think the classic like leak. What's the term for laws? Like litigious? No, that's the classic mistake that I see is like the best laid intentions and then the worst execution, right? Where it's like they've got a really nice idea with what they're trying to do here, but then they don't consider all of the ifs, ands, or buts. And because they're pushing forward with this policy change, it's almost all of the ifs, ands, or buts are going to be kind of knee-jerk reactions. And I'm really worried to see kind of some reckless decisions because of that. I think things can be done well with a little bit more forethought and planning. But you know?
You're so young and
I know.
optimistic about government.
I know. Well, I literally just expressed my concern, right? We'll break you soon, Hamish. Don't worry.
You know, I see the complaints on social media from people that talk about how Boulder of the '90s was this golden era. And so it's sort of like Burning Man. It was better last year. That's the thing that everyone says all the time, and it's really kind of a funny meme. And that's also true of the city of Boulder. It was always better 10 years ago. And there's a moral argument that we should build more housing so Boulder is more affordable. I just don't see any potential material way we can increase housing supply in the city of Boulder without radically reducing the quality of life for everyone who lives here, because of just the simple fact that there's a lot more people here. And anyone who's lived in a big city will likely chime in and say, yeah, it is. There's a certain, it's like chickens in a battery cage, right? They're congested and they start attacking each other. Yeah. Well, it's like the closer you force people to live together, the less neighborly they become.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
When I lived in New York City, I didn't even know my neighbor on the other side of the wall. And everywhere you went, there was a line, and there was a snippy sharpness to life, and everyone was kind of rude. Not all the time. New York City is a lovely place, but there's a stress level that
they didn't have time
comes
for
from
you.
Density.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's just the higher the density, the more likely it's going to be stressful. And the vast majority of people that have moved into the city of Boulder in the last 50 years have moved here for the quality of life, for the small town city feel. And it's already radically different. It's going to keep accelerating, and that's the truth. Irrespective of how you feel morally about housing, whether housing should be a right or not, and whether we can actually meaningfully increase supply enough to drop prices, all of that is interesting arguments. I think we can't, and I think that all we're going to do is make a lot of money for developers, and house prices are not going to decrease, and we're going to see a reduction in the quality of life in the city.
How many Via Vara developments do we want, you know?
Right. Right. Do you want Via Vara right next to you at Boulder Junction? Because that's what that looks like.
Yeah. If you don't know, Via Vara is a very strange development off 36. It's just, dunk, there it is.
It looks like a giant hotel complex.
Or the hospital complex off 287. It looks like that.
Yeah. It's really sad. And, I mean, it's housing units, right? People need housing, and it's affordable, but it's very few people, given the choice, if they can afford it, would choose to live there, in my opinion. It fits the budget, as my dad would say growing up. And I think that's what we're going to see at 55th and Arapahoe.
Yeah.
That entire development turn into Via Vara, or something maybe even further east on Pearl Parkway. That sort of locations where there's least likely to be organized resistance are going to see massive.
Yeah, they're going to be kind of like exploited, right? Or kind of taken advantage of. Right,
because they know they're gonna be able to get that through with the least resistance, and the fewer number of owners. Right, there's larger parcels they can buy from a commercial. In fact, that's the right move. If you're a developer, is to go buy something that's zoned commercial, and in that zone of control where we know there's going to be a lot more development, 55 than Arapahoe, buy a big parcel and plan to build a giant Via Vara on it, micro hotel, 300 square feet.
Oh God!
You know,
pod hotel,
$2,500 a month, and the city doesn't mandate, by the way, that these are owned units. They're totally happy. Housing units are housing units.
Yeah.
So you have thousands and thousands of rentals.
See what I'm saying? Like, best intentions, but there's not a lot of thought into the execution. Anyhow, we're getting there on time.
Well, who benefits from lots and lots of rentals owned by the city?
I mean, yeah. The city doesn't care, right? As long as they're getting their tax. Anyway. Okay. Okay.
Well, there's a whole... People serve their own interests. So what do you think is going to get permitted faster? The one that has a lot more jobs for city staff, or the ones that are individually owned?
Moving on.
Moving on. Let's not go to conspiracy land. Let's not do it. All right. I think we've covered in the news.
Yes.
And now let's hit our final segment.
Wait, did we?
This is a segment.
Oh, yeah, there were just 2 news things. So I had 3 here.
There were just 2 news articles.
Okay.
You want to talk about something else?
No, I had 3 written down. Carrying on.
We could talk about the new Taylor Swift album.
I haven't heard it yet. Have you?
You should. It's great.
I'll check it out. Okay, we've talked about that.
All right. Tell me something I don't know.
Okay.
And you've heard me harp about the fiction of private network effects with large brokerages and whether or not it actually has a significant impact. And last year I was approached by a past client who I helped represent, I represented them on the purchase of this amazing house and have talked to them many times along the way, and they're friends. And about last summer he said to me, look, Osman, I'm thinking about listing with Compass because they have just such a bigger presence, and we are buying a house that we discovered in California only through the magic of our Compass agent. And no one else had seen it. It had just hit the market, but it was only being shown to Compass agents. And that Compass private network thing is real. And so we're probably going to list with them because they just have so much bigger brand reach than House Einstein. And he was really apologetic and said, we're friends. I hope we still can be friends. And I said, of course, your decision to choose another agent is not based on our friendship or loyalty to me. I would like to demonstrate to you all the ways we are better. And the first thing I want to do is pop a bubble, pop this notion that there are these private deal networks that somehow get more deals done. And then in the last couple of months, you and I have worked on developing that entire list of how we're better, as well as showing people in our marketing and our videography and the view counts, the systems with competitive analysis weekly of the market, with phone call feedback, with attended showings, all the things we're now doing that we didn't used to do. To show, and all of it is above and beyond what I believe our competitors have to offer at very similar commission splits. But that's neither here nor there. He had already committed to Compass, and that listing went live. And I was just reminded of the data set, so I went through my email and I found it. And so this isn't just me talking about it. This is actually looking at the city of Boulder sales, and this is for a time period that ended July 2023, because that's when I was talking to this client. And I went back and I looked from January 2022 to July 23. So that was a period of about 18 months of data. And I'm happy to do it again for anybody that seriously wants to see this data. And I only looked at high-end deals because that was this particular listing. And I characterized that as over 3 million. So all house sales over 3 million since 2022 to July 23. And of those, only 10% of those high-end deals were double-ended. 10% within the same brokerage. And then I looked at Compass specifically to see, if this private client thing was having an effect. And there the number dropped to 5.9%.
I was going to say, and if it was like a big effect, you would expect that to be an even larger percentage, right?
Right. Yeah. And when I looked even deeper into that data set, I saw that there was one agent in particular who had a new development that he had been the listing agent for, and also I believe an investor on, Odinanta. I won't mention his name, but we like doing deals with him. He's fine to work with. But he stood out as having done a lot of double-ended deals at Compass during that time period because of Odinanta on the West End. That's a brand new development. And even so, we're at 5.9% in-house deals for private client network deals. So 10%. So let's flip that around. 90% of deals are not within the same brokerage. And for Compass specifically, it's 94% of deals during this time period, which I didn't cherry pick. It just happened to be the 18-month period before I was looking at it. And I'm happy to do this all over again if somebody is seriously believing that Compass's private network has any value to you. I will 100% do the data analysis with you sitting in the room. We'll download the data together so you can see how it's put together. We'll dump it into a spreadsheet, and I'll show you how it's calculated. It's frankly just BS. And it's frustrating because I lost a client over it, but I can't compete with $1 billion worth of marketing. And if people are convinced of, all the advertising and sophistication of their shop is convincing you of something that's not true, it's very hard for the lone voice with carrying his spreadsheet and the data to show you that this is nonsense. But it is what it is. I wish them well. It's such a cool house. I hope I represent the buyer. And that's
go ahead.
That's it in a nutshell.
I think with real estate, there's this perceived sense of exclusivity and gotta have it that carries so loudly that people forget that there's the whole public forum and things have to be publicly advertised and everything. So people easily get swept into this private client network, and they think, well, of course, because that's almost what a good agent is to them, is somebody who can find them an off-market house or a sweet deal or something like that. And it's like, getting caught in the fluff and everything when it comes down to deal negotiation and actually knowing how to make shit shine and, how to make stuff work, And another comment I had for you is you do some of your best data pools when you're doing a cathartic data pool.
When I'm angry about something and somebody's claimed something, like there's a listing up here in close to where I live, and it's an active listing, so I can't go into details on it. They just dropped it another 100.
Yeah, they did.
And this agent, like, they came in $750,000 above what I thought was a reasonable number for this house. And I was getting ready to list it slightly above that number, my number. And then this agent came in with an algorithm and blew away. Yeah. And not a Compass agent, by the way. Blew away my number. And I got so angry, I did it twice. Once with my wife sitting next to me going, can we just watch Netflix? And I'm like, no, let's look at the data. And we went through the data. She's like, you're right. Okay, you're right. I'm like, I just can't believe she claimed this number.
And we did it together too. Yeah.
This is like 5-time clients I lost over this stupidity. And just, if you're thinking about going with somebody who's telling you what you want to believe, and is sparkling sunshine and rainbows and claiming private networks, or we sell more modern homes than anybody else. We understand the modern luxury buyer. That guy with the spreadsheet, he's a data nerd, but he doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah. Please, let's sit down together, and no obligation. As long as you haven't signed a listing agreement, no obligation. You don't have to choose me. Let's go through it. All I ask is you let me give you my pitch on what we have to offer, but I'll show you it with data. Mm-hmm. It will not be wishful thinking, and it will not be my ego. And so this segment, Tell You Something You Don't Know, is just to remind you of how low the percentage of in-house double-ended deals are.
Yeah.
It's 90% of deals have different buyer and seller agents involved. And for Compass specifically, in the data set I analyzed, above 3 million, city of Boulder, it was 96% was not with private client network. So if you want to go for that 4% chance that this, they've got somebody in their private client network that they shouldn't be doing anyway, if they do that, okay, go for it. But as a seller, you want to expose your home to the largest segment of the market. You do want to tease a little bit. You do want to price it right. You do want to do the staging. You do want to fix the things that are wrong with it, all the stuff we walk our clients through every day. But you don't want to believe in, rainbows and fairy tales and unicorns.
And just, what's the term? Humor me, maybe. Humoring this mental exercise. If this private client network factors in and has value to you as a prospective seller or buyer, are you going to also consider other qualities of an agent, or is this it? Maybe, they got their private network, but are they going to lose you the deal in the long run, or, are they going to cost you money? Like, there's got to be more factors to it. Otherwise, then, how do you respect the person doing the work? Or is it just exclusivity?
How do you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning?
Thank you. You cut right through it. No.
When you wake up in the morning and that person's in bed with you, and you look over there, how do you feel? How hungover are you? I've often thought about having like the fake, Orphan Annie's decoder ring society, the super secret club, real estate club, and private client network. Doesn't that just sound so sexy and secretive? It's private. It's a client network. We call it the consortium. Yeah. We're in the consortium of high-end realtors that only do business with each other, and we'll make a little stamp and we'll put it at the bottom of our website. That part of the consortium.
And that whole notion confuses me too, because it's like, how do you decide only to work together when your clients are the ones with their needs? There's just a lot of incongruencies, right?
It's based on lack of knowledge of how the industry really works. We know that agents choose brokerages based on their brand presence, and Compass has they bought it. They bought the market. They have a great brand presence. There's no arguing with that. And we know that exclusivity creates a sense of scarcity. Scarcity drives up the price. And if you believe that you're being offered something no one else is offering, you might pay more for it. And if you believe these people have the ability to do that, you might pay more for it. Look, and it's true. So agents know about listings. I've shared 4 of them in this podcast that are coming. So we know about them, yes. But that's not a private client network, and it's not because of the House Einstein brand. It's because of the relationships I have with sellers that are in the pipeline. Individual sellers. And you have to be my client for me to tell you about those homes.
Yep. I mean, we could go on and on and on.
With specificity.
Yeah,
I can
with
tease
specificity.
you. I can't tell you the actual listings at this time. You have to be a client, but you've been teased.
Yes. Consider yourself teased.
Consider yourself teased and wait until it hits the market next month. For two of them, one or two of them might hit this month. Well, one's going to hit this month.
All right.
Three might hit next month. Yeah.
And with that, I think we're there. Yeah?
Okay, let's wrap it up, Hamish. You want to do the power wrap up?
I sure do. Dear listener, we've missed you. It's been a week without the podcast, and we're sure your ears were lonely. So thank you for listening this far forward. We've absolutely had a blast on this podcast, and we can't wait to hear from you or talk to you next week. To hold you over, be sure to check out our website. We have a blog there where we'll talk about some notable sales. We'll repost some market updates from Osman's newsletter, though also a good plug for Osman's newsletter. There's a tab for it on that website. And that newsletter gets into some fresh listings that we can't discuss even on this podcast. It gets into the nitty gritty, kind of what makes that listing good or bad. We also have some very good other social medias. Check out our Instagram, which stays quite active, and check out our YouTube. We just got a video on the Holiday neighborhood. We're talking about those two North Boulder properties, so there's a little educational video on the North Boulder neighborhood there.
And another one coming?
Yes, we also will be having a video on Wash Park in Denver coming up soon from House Einstein's Sophie Clore. She's a super talented Denver agent and has lots to share there too. So should be really exciting. And thank you so much for joining us. Osman, you got anything to add?
No. Thank you so much for joining us. Check out the check out the YouTube channel. Sign up for the newsletter. I will get it out again this month, and I will focus on mostly, well, at least 50% fresh listings on the market, and you can't get that content anywhere else. And if you'd like to see property with us, you can find us at houseeinstein.com if you're thinking about selling and you want honest advice and want to see our menu of services that actually have impact. Look for us at houseeinstein.com, and we'll catch you next time.
Take care.